Hello and welcome to season 2025 of Talking Automotive with Mark and John. Hopefully you've enjoyed our previous seasons. And today we've got Rob from Motafix who's going to talk to us about the after-sales and service business and where it's at currently and where it's going.
Let's jump into it. Rob, thanks very much for joining us today. Great to have you on the show. Maybe to kick things off, can you tell us a little bit about your company and how it all started?
Certainly. So our company is called Motafix. We're located in the heart of Mentone's business district. We've been at that site for 38 years, I think it is this year. It was my father's business before mine. He bought it when it was an operational mechanical workshop at that stage, but it has grown and changed a fair amount since then. I think that was 88 when he bought in. He had a smaller workshop somewhere else in Mentone before he got to the site we're currently on. He's been retired for the last 5 years and I took the reins. We do everything from routine maintenance through to four-wheel drive modification and suspension work. Yeah, we tend to stick to a lot of the Japanese models, Australian models, American models, more so than the European ones. We do a lot of Volkswagen, Audi, Skoda group though. There's a high content of them around our area. Yeah, we're a five-hoist workshop with 4 or 5 fully qualifieds, including myself, 4 mechanics and 1 full-time auto electrician. And then I have 2 part-time office admin staff that help me out on a daily basis. And I would say we're probably about as big as a small workshop can get.
So how did you start in the business? Was your dad a tech and he decided to go out on his own, or what? How did you get in? How did your father get into the business?
His story is he started university after high school and flunked out in his second year and started an auto electrical apprenticeship at that point forward. He's always told me he won Apprentice of the Year when he was qualified in his final year. And within about 3 years after his apprenticeship, he started running his own business. He quite often said that during his apprenticeship, he was often teaching his boss certain things that he wasn't privy to. So, yeah, he's always been a very smart man, my father, and very checked into anything he does, applies himself fully. I think the auto electrical trade was probably a lot more evolved back then than what it's sort of come to now. I think these days a mechanic and auto electrical, you almost need both trades to be a mechanic, whereas back then it was a very different mechanical and auto electrical trade. He's run his own business, I think it was since 83, and I've probably learned everything that I know from him, definitely. How I got into it was I left school at the end of year 11. But I had previously worked as a casual cleaner for Dad since year 7. So about 5 years of schooling. Every night after school, I'd be at the workshop, sweeping floors, emptying bins, washing cars, picking up bits and pieces as I went along. And yeah, when I finished year 11, I knew I didn't want to go to university. So year 12 wasn't going to be the best path for me. And Dad had an apprenticeship ready and waiting for me. So I jumped straight into that.
It's interesting that you've already talking about the migration of say the automotive tech and the auto electrician. I recall being a tech from way back when. That you're right. There was very much the mechanical, because cars were very mechanical, and then there was the electrical side. And as the years have passed, there's been more and more development with electronics and electrics, and obviously now that we've got electric vehicles, where do you see the place for the old school tech?
You need to have both sides to be a good diagnostic mechanic. You can't just be mechanically minded. You need to have a very good understanding of wiring diagrams, how electrical components work, and being able to apply that knowledge with your mechanical knowledge to diagnose cars. Yeah, that all probably started changing with the introduction of EFI, mainly back in probably the early 80s. And it's just every new generation of car that comes out, they get more and more into one together rather than being two separately sided views on the automotive, on cars. Without the proper information these days, it's almost impossible to work on and diagnose vehicles. You need the wiring diagrams, you need technical information, you need to know when programming is involved with new parts. they're very much, I would say that the old school terms for auto electrical is almost a thing of the past, and mechanical tech needs to be an auto elec as well if you want to be a very good diagnostician in your work.
So apart from the technical side, what else do you believe you need to do to make the business successful? So is it the skill set of the repairing and diagnosis, but what other elements?
Customer service is probably the biggest number one thing you need to be good at. You need to retain and keep your customers. You need to obviously provide the good service in the first place with what you're doing on the cars. Our philosophy at Motafix is what my father's taught me is to be truthful to customers at every turn. Make sure you're telling them what's going on with their car, even if sometimes you've got the diagnosis wrong or something's gone wrong with their car. Being upfront and truthful with them is the best way forward. It's how you build a good relationship and build trust between your customers. So that's extremely important. I would feel that a good 50+% of my customers, I feel like I've got a personal relationship with them because they're coming back every year for servicing and maintenance, and you've got to build on that relationship. So that's very important. Customer relations is probably the top priority. Getting the correct technical information on vehicles is difficult, but making sure you've got all the programs at your fingertips to do that. So we use a number of different programs. We've got the VACC platform with VACC Online and the Haynes Pro programming. We use Autodata, and we also use Boyce's Auto Library. And, they've all got their strengths and all got some weaknesses, but you put them all together and you've got a lot of good information there. So that's key. And retaining good staff, finding and retaining good staff members that you trust and are going to do the work the way that you expect it to be done and do it correctly.
Rob, talking about customer service, it's people say, "Oh, do good customer service," but it's the devil's in the detail. Are there any particular things that you really concentrate on? You mentioned being truthful, but how do you go about that? What do you actually do to make sure that all comes across properly?
Recording all that information. I think our invoices are probably one of the most detailed mechanical invoices that you'll see out there. Making sure that you really record everything that you have done to the car, potential issues. Yeah, giving the customer all the information on a document, I think, is key. It also gives you a very good ground to stand on when something in the future arises. You can refer back to that information that you recorded. Anything from as simple as a fault code logged in history of an ECU may not have been a problem for the customer back then, but if you record it in your information moving forward, if it reoccurs, they've then got a bit of background information that it might have been a problem that was arising. That's definitely something that we do at Motafix. Being truthful, as I said, to the customer, never telling them a lie, keeping old parts and showing customers failed components or even just worn out components, whether it's something as simple as a cabin air filter or a leaking EGR cooler that we had this week. Being able to show the customer the actual part that you've replaced and what's gone wrong with it and why you've replaced it, that builds a good rapport and a good trust as well.
Are there still instances, I remember way back in my time in dealer service land, where you'd get the odd customer would get a texter and mark the oil filter to see whether it's been changed. Is there still that level of cynicism towards the repair industry, or is that something that's gone?
No, definitely still see it a bit. It's not... Yeah, it's probably not quite as bad as that anymore as marking an oil filter, but I do get customers that will double check their oil level and pop the bonnet after we're finished with it. I also find that that's usually new customers to us. Once they've been with us for a service or a repair once or twice, you find moving forward they don't feel the need to do that. So, but it is out there. There is always a stigma around mechanical workshops because there are still a number of places out there that don't always do the right thing, and that does give us a bit of a bad name. The dealer networks often get a bit of a reputation for not having the best customer service as well. So, and a lot of people go to the dealer network because obviously the convenience, the cap price servicing, which the value you just can't beat being a small business. It is out there, but I definitely find with my clientele, once they've been with us for a little bit of time, that's not an issue anymore.
But I think also the other thing which I was quite interested in is because I've had the privilege to come and service with you for a couple of years now, is that you meet every single customer and do the handover when he picks up his car. So it's not, you're just not giving it to some junior person to do the service advisor or someone to hand over the car in the evening. You speak to the car and go through in detail through the invoice and everything that's there. So to me, that's fascinating and interesting way to approach it.
And I think that's an important part of customer service, having that direct link with the people that are working on your car. And sometimes that is myself. I spend about 20% of my time in the workshop. Having that link between the car and the customer is very important. And I think the dealers miss that a little bit with their customer service team compared to their actual mechanical team. But on the bigger the scale is, the harder it is that to do. So on our small business scale, which is a very, very busy small business, but we're still able to do that. And I would do that with at least 10 to 15 customers a day. Using the iPad as well is great. We take a lot of photos and show customers photos of things underneath their car. They take to that really well. And again, it's just building on that trust between us and the customer.
So with the photos, do you use any particular platforms or you just text them through?
No, yeah, we just take them on the iPad and send them or email them through if the customer has requested them. I have seen, again, a lot of the dealers that they will send a certain amount of photos with every service as part of their invoice. We don't really have that ability and haven't invested in multiple laptops or iPads for each staff member. We've just got a workshop one that we all share and use. That's probably something we can look at in the future moving forward. It's probably the next logical step to have that into our invoicing software because, yeah, it definitely shows that you're doing something that you're doing and easy for fault finding when you're showing customers oil leaks or tyre wear or things like that. So definitely something we could probably enter into our business in the future.
Rob, what do you think are the biggest challenges for a small service business going forward?
I would say there's probably three main areas there. The first is something that we've experienced over the last 6 to 12 months, and that's staffing shortages in our industry. We've been looking for a qualified mechanic that had been in the trade at least 5 years, and it was very, very difficult to find someone. There was a couple of times that we'd get contact with them either through our Seek ad or word of mouth, and you'd organise an interview and they wouldn't even show up because they'd already found a job before they would come down and see you. We even went to the degree of advertising on one of those big LED road signs out the front of our workshop, which I think helped. It definitely showed the community that we were looking. We were lucky enough to put on a new employee at the start of this year who's been a great fit and I think will be a real asset to us.
And where did you find him? How did you get him?
Through our Seek ad. And I think we were just lucky that we got in quickly. He was a local to Mentone to our shop, so we were able to get him down for an interview. And then what I presented, I was hoping was going to be enough. And sure enough, he gave us the thumbs up and we're a couple of months in now and it's looking very positive. So, but finding good staff members that are trustworthy, punctual and going to turn up and also that know their trade, I think there's a huge shortage of them in Australia. That's been probably something it's been an issue, not just since COVID, but before COVID, with a lack of apprentices coming through the industry. And yeah, since COVID, a lot of, I would say, older mechanics have either got out of the trade or retired. I know local to us in the Cheltenham Mentone area, there's been 3 workshops, all about the same size as us, all run by gentlemen that are in their late 60s, a bit like my father, and they've all closed and weren't able to sell their businesses. With those people exiting the trade, it's definitely left a big hole of the, say, late 20s to early 40s age gap in our industry.
Why is that? Because this is something that John and I've spoken many times, and it seems it's not just the auto industry. It seems to be anything associated with the metal trades. Why is it that there's this gap between, say, a 23-year-old and a 60-year-old in the technical trade of any sort?
Yeah, it's a good question and a hard one to answer. I'm 34 myself, and I know of the group of guys that I went through trade school with, there's very few of us that are still in the trade. They've all moved on to other industries. Cars and vehicles are still their hobby and still something they get involved in, but not something they work in on the day-to-day. It is a difficult trade. a lot of it is repetitive work with servicing. A lot of it is oil and filter changing and brake changing and stuff that you would do, dozens of times a week. You can't always have, a complex timing belt or a suspension upgrade to give to your workers every day. So keeping them interested is a big part, I think. Pay is always a factor in a lot of industries. If you compare the auto industry with something like working on any of the big road projects we've got in Victoria at the moment, you just can't compare the wages there. So the award, our base award, definitely could do with some looking at. The fact that the guys that are good at it can make money on the side doing mechanical work as well as have a full-time job is another factor there. It's something they can do as more of a hobby or a backyard working. It's hard to say why there's the gap in the guys that have left the trade, to be honest, Mark. Yeah, lack of an apprentice drive probably 10 years ago has got a big factor to it. Maybe more incentives to have apprentices in the auto industry as well.
There's another question I'm keen to ask. Like, we've just had a massive, John? It's 1 million immigrants have turned up here in the last 2 years. So we've had this huge immigration influx. Have we got any mechanics in that mob?
Definitely. There are quite a few that I think we were actually, by the lobbying from the VACC with the government, they actually got us into the critical sector. So there are quite a few coming through now. Yeah, I think a lot of them have flowed through to dealers, to be honest. And how a small business gets in contact with employees is difficult compared to a dealer network where they have whole teams searching for people, interviewing, vetting, finding people, even if they're not in the country, to come over and work, compared to a small shop where it's only myself and one other admin staff that are checking Seek ads or making phone calls to try and find an employee. There's a big difference there.
No, that's fine, because it's something that we're very curious about, and it's something that's been around for quite a while. It's been a challenge for, as I say, before COVID. But we're thinking with this influx of people, like we've seen, it seemed to fill all the transport logistics spots have been filled by a lot of these recent arrivals, which is fantastic. We needed that. But I'm just wondering whether the government's been focusing on getting these skills in for the auto industry, given that we've been screaming for it for way before the pandemic.
We did do a little bit of investigating to a company that is through the Capricorn Society that actually brings in workers from the Philippines that are qualified in Australian recognised qualification from light vehicle or diesel mechanics. Still, a lot of the onus and cost is on the company bringing them in to find housing, to set them up. And that's before they even start working, which again, for a small business is hard to do. The option is there. And once they are here, there is some government help, but the upfront and finding the right person and the right fit for your business, I think is a bit of a, and it's not an easy stepping stone there.
And I think also a big challenge with that is retaining them, because after 2 years or 3 years,
definitely,
they often move on. So I think a lot of dealerships have a struggle with that whole concept.
Correct.
And they continue bringing in people, and the cost is quite huge.
Yes.
It's not an easy process.
Correct. Yes, we did look into it, and it's at that stage it wasn't something from a cost point of view I could even consider. But yeah, I've definitely heard that it's a 2-year sort of contract that they come over on, and if you'd want to try and keep them if they're a good worker and know their stuff, but it might not be the primary goal of the person with the move over here.
Rob, in terms of looking after your staff, is there anything in particular that you do to try and retain staff? Because you said that's your biggest challenge.
It's definitely one of the challenges for sure. I think we do a pretty good job of it at Motafix, treating everyone equally and being hopefully a stress-free environment. I don't do clock on, clock off times for jobs. I know a lot of other workshops make employees, all right, got a set time and log their hours for each job. We don't do that at Motafix. I feel it probably puts a little bit of unnecessary pressure on my techs. I believe in the quality over quantity. Some days one of my techs might only get through 3 services a day because we've taken extra care in a few things that we've done. That's definitely one part of it, not logging times. I think that's good. We do lunch, shout lunch for the staff once a month. I think that's a good team exercise. We all sit down and eat together, which is nice. Definitely pay rates are a big part of retaining staff. So we're well and truly above the award. I think any workshop will be above the award because it's just astronomically low. But yeah, good hourly rates is definitely a part of it. Making sure you work with the employee if they've got any special requirements. I've got one employee that only works 4 days a week because that's what suits him. And I'm more than happy to work around that if that's what they want to do. Making sure that you provide their holiday time almost whenever they request it, as long as it's only one person off at a time for a small business. But saying yes as much as you can to any of their requests is a big part of it. Trying to always relate to them on a human level and on a friendship level, more than a business side of things. I like to see myself as a manager more than a boss. Everyone sort of knows their roles at Motafix because we've retained our staff very well over the years. So yeah, making sure that they have got the room to do their job as well, and all the support from me as well.
It sounds like you've got it sorted as far as looking after the team, which is so critical and so often in the industry, because when you talk about the clocking on, clocking off, I know that when I've the roles I've had running like dealership service departments, etc., the hatred that the techs have for the clock, and they despise the clock when they've got a clock on, clock off, and then they're measured around that. Now, I'm quite keen to ask a question. We talked before about electric vehicles. What do you see as the impact from a long-term perspective with your business, with EVs?
Yeah, well, definitely they're making a huge impact on the scene at the moment. With hybrid vehicles first, I don't think it's going to affect our industry too much. Hybrid vehicles still have an internal combustion engine and still have all the serviceable components that a standard vehicle without electric assist or hybrid systems have. Hybrid vehicles not going to really affect the service and repair industry. Full electric vehicles are different though, definitely. There are less moving parts, less serviceable parts, less maintenance all round. We don't sell tyres at Motafix, so that's a big part of electric vehicles. If you can still fit tyres and sell tyres for them, that is a plus. But from a maintenance point of view, I know on a Tesla we've had a few of them through for roadworthies, not for servicing, but for roadworthy inspections. There's a transmission oil filter on them. There's a cabin air filter on them, and they're about the only replacement filters on the entire car. They don't wear out brake pads nearly as fast. They'll last 4 to 5 times longer, a set of brake pads. Sometimes on electric vehicles, you'll actually be replacing brake pads because of the age of the pad, not because they're worn out. That's just because the regenerative braking through the electric system slows the car down and you don't need to touch your brake pedal nearly as much. So it's definitely going to have an impact on our industry for sure. Gearing up to work on electric vehicles for a workshop of our size hasn't been required yet, but I would say in 5 years from now, that'll be a very different story, and we will need to have the equipment and the training to be able to work on them, hopefully diagnose them. And yeah, it's definitely going to take a lot out of a smaller business's revenue stream.
Is there any other revenue streams you can add on to counter that from a small business point of view?
That's a very good question, John. From an electric car point of view, learning or knowing how to replace their batteries will be probably the biggest one once they are 10 to 15 years old. When they drop a cell inside of a battery, it can render the whole car immobilized. So being able to replace them, having an industry in Australia that can even repair the batteries. I know in the US they've got a bit of a battery repair industry, which would be definitely a lot cheaper than replacing a whole battery unit, which I'm not aware of here in Australia at this point, but I'm sure that's something that the battery companies are looking at, or even the manufacturers are looking at setting up. So yeah, being able to replace the batteries is probably the biggest part of an electric vehicle down the track for a mechanical workshop like ours. Because if you can't do that or fault find a battery, a faulty battery, then there's not going to be too much else that's going to go wrong on those vehicles. Yes, you'll have door locks that'll fail or wiper motors and items like that. which are very similar systems that we've already got in our vehicles that we're working on at the moment. But the main component is obviously the battery side of things. So without being able to diagnose and repair or replace those batteries, there really won't be too much else for us to get into on them that I'm aware of at this stage.
It's interesting, Rob, when you touch base on the basics of the human bit first. The human bit from a customer, it's how you differentiate. The human bit from a tech perspective, how you attract and retain them. But ultimately, knowing your stuff, which is the technical, both mechanical and electrical, but then the migration of electrical, the increase in that the requirement to do the diagnostics is very much coming through. So if you humanise the skill set, you'll be successful. But notwithstanding that, there's the risks of the EVs, but you're already looking into, okay, and you raise a really good point, because the brakes, absolutely, there's going to be less of that, but there's the wiper motors are still there. There's other elements that are still there, and there will be opportunities for, as you say, replacing batteries, and I dare say replacing electric motors at some point.
Circling back to that comment about technical information, that is also definitely something that affects the industry. I mentioned that we have a number of programs at our disposal, but none of them are perfect. And there are so many different variants of every car out there. Sometimes we start a diagnostic process. We get what we think is the right wiring diagram. We get halfway through it and we realise, oh, hang on, no, this wiring diagram doesn't match up to what we've actually got in front of us. We've got to go back to the drawing board. So getting the correct technical information, which will be extremely important with electric vehicles as well, is difficult, and something that is hard for a small business to always have at our fingertips. Obviously, the dealers have it. You can pay the dealers for subscriptions to their information, which is part of that freedom of information in the auto industry, but it's expensive, and you usually only pay for a day or a week or a month at a time. And it's usually only specific to that model of car that you've requested, not, say, the whole of the Toyota's information or the whole of Nissan's information. So getting the correct info and correct wiring diagrams on vehicles is definitely a problem within the industry. It has been for a very long time. On electric vehicles, that's definitely going to be key.
Because it's quite interesting you're talking about the freedom of information, because under block exemption in Europe, if you wanted to become a service dealer for, say, Toyota, and I worked for Toyota, the manufacturer, I couldn't stop you becoming a service dealer as long as you met the requirements of a service dealer that Toyota specified. So once they specify the requirements, every single of their dealers had to meet those requirements 100%. Than any other service outlet who want to become a dealer, as long as you met that. And then he has access to all the information on all their models and everything. So it's quite fascinating how that all works.
Yeah, it is. It's a bit different in Australia. They've always been, the dealers and the dealer networks have always been very closed off to other workshops, and even just sometimes we need dealers to do software updates on vehicles, and even just to get a foot in the door to get them to be able to help us out, or it's just easier to send the customer there rather than us trying to connect with the dealer. Whereas other small workshops in our area, we got many friends, and we all help each other out if we needed to borrow a vehicle-specific tool or ring up about an information, or we've got a problem job that we need help with, which I've done many times before. You can't do that with the dealer network. They're closed off. So unless you're paying, you really don't get anything out of them.
Just some fantastic insights to where the service network is right now, as far as we're well and truly in the midst of that transition that we often talk of. John and I have been doing these podcasts for a few years now, and we sort of were saying, well, this is what's going to be happening. But the beauty is, and it's funny, there's things we think are going to happen fast usually take longer, and things that we think are going to be long-term happen quicker than we think. So it's interesting that you're already saying that the hybrids aren't going to be a problem, because they still have the ICE, the internal combustion engine, all the associated components. It's interesting that they're the volume, or they're the vehicles that are actually selling well now. So that means that there's still going to be a fair amount of traditional ICE engines for longer than what people thought, because everyone thought we're just going to ditch ICE and we're going to be EVs. And we're seeing this trend in Europe very much so. The pure EVs have sort of hit a bit of a plateau. So other than countries like Norway, which ironically pay for everything with the oil that they sell to everybody else, but they drive around in EVs. So here we have, the rest of Europe is still very much hybrid and ICE. And ICE is going to continue for longer than what most of us thought it would, because there still is no silver bullet with EV. So it's great for your industry that that's going to continue. And it's going to be for many, many more years than what a lot of people anticipate.
I think that hybrids suit Australia very well, particularly at the moment, for a couple of reasons. We do long distance travel more so than Europeans. So the ease of filling up your tank rather than having to plan out a trip and know where you can charge is a benefit with the hybrid. Yeah, I don't want to paint our industry in all doom and gloom either. It's I think for a business like ours, we're thriving, and I think we've got a great workplace, and we're constantly learning and adapting to what's going on around us. And I think for anyone that wants to get into the trade, there is still a lot of interesting mechanical work out there, and it will be for quite some time. And definitely, if you were keen on it, to get into it when you're younger, because by the time a young person is in their 30s or 40s now, I would say that and they're good at their trade, they'll be highly sought after in another 20 years from now.
Actually, one last question I was going to ask you, Rob, just before finishing up. With the high interest rates and cost of living crisis, etc., has that impacted the service industry in the after-sales area?
Definitely us. Our hourly rate had to go up fairly significantly last year to definitely counteract higher rent, energy bills. Cost of parts skyrocketed after COVID. They're starting to seem to actually plateaued or come down a little bit now, which is good. But definitely, I see it even with a lot of our customers. They're very mindful on what they're spending, and the question of how long will something last, I'm asked on a daily basis now when I'm ringing a customer, whether it's regarding suspension, brakes or tyres. The question is, how long will it last? So I've definitely noticed that from our clients' point of views. The cost of living has definitely had an impact for sure.
And as far as, is there less work? Are people sort of kicking it down the road, or is their volume still coming through?
We're lucky. As I said, we've got a strong client base in Mentone, that we haven't got a lot of dealers right around us either. We're quite isolated in the way of a lot of other workshops, so we're not competing for work in our immediate vicinity, which is a real benefit of our location. Definitely people putting things off, more cars rolling in with metal-to-metal brakes than I've almost experienced before in the 17 years I've been in the trade. So that's very noticeable. Definitely reporting to customers that they've got unroadworthy tyres on cars and they're not calling back for another month or so before booking in to us to sort tyres or to sort suspension and things like that. So yeah, it's had an impact from every level. But yeah, we've noticed it in the running a business side of things, that the cost of doing that has skyrocketed the last 2 years. Thanks, Mark. Pleasure to meet you.
And you too. Really, good luck. You sounds like a terrific business, and all the best to you.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks again, Rob. See you then.
Thanks for listening. Hopefully you got as much out of the conversation with Rob as we did.